Well, greetings, everyone. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, and I want to welcome you to Soul Empowerment. And today, this is episode number 74, and we're calling this one Breaking Family Role Patterns. Now, before I go into what I want to talk about today, there's some interesting information that I want to share with you. First of all, you'll notice that there's only 3 people on camera here right now. And that's because our beautiful friend, Gail Nowak, has decided to move on. She's got some other things that are really taking up more of her time, and she wants to focus her energies on those. And we were hoping to have her on today so we could give her a proper goodbye, but unfortunately, she's not able to make it. So I just wanted to say a few things about Gail before we move into the program. The first thing I'd like you to know about Gail is this program, Soul Empowerment, its first episode was on January 14th, 2020. So we've been around for a while. Now, this is episode 74, I think. So you can tell we're into our 6th year now, or is it our 7th? We've completed 6 years, I should say, and we're into our 7th. And Gail, I've gone through a number of different co-hosts on this program. I think Sarah has been the most long-lasting one. Thank you, Sarah, for that. But Gail joined us for her first episode on March 8th, 2023. And I think she might have missed one after that. But she has been very present, very supportive, very generous with her wisdom and her beautiful shares and everything else. And I've loved having her on the show. And Sarah and Scott, I wonder if you'd like to say a few words before we actually get into the program.
Oh, Gail's been brilliant, and I love the fact that, with all of the people that have been on these programs, that we come from different perspectives, different understandings, different experiences, and that is what's so important. And I am so pleased that when the previous people left and Gail joined us, it was brilliant. I think Scott, did you have joined around about the same time? I don't know. It's wonderful. And Gail, thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared with us all.
And I agree. Gail always brought a wonderfully introspective perspective. She always came back to leading with her heart. She's in all the work she does. She goes forward with that sense of leadership, that sense of building your business through your heart. And it always showed through. And it was always well thought out, and she kind of drove us sometimes to go deeper, and I love that.
Right? Yeah. It's one of those things where it's both a loss and a gain. I think, for us, it's a bit of a loss of one personality who helped to shape what we have been bringing to this program, and it's also a gain for the world because now I think. Gail is going to she's going to be able to bring more of herself into the work that she does as a visibility coach and a leadership coach and a pretty brilliant one at that. So I'm just honored that she stuck with us as long as she did. I'm grateful that she was here, and I want to say thank you, Gail, for everything. And I wish you all the very best of luck. And so one of the funny things about this is, as I said, I originally was hoping that Gail would join us for a final closing episode, and then I was going to reach out to find a replacement. As luck would have it, things shifted and changed and all kinds of, this is the way the universe works, right? A door closes, they say, and a window opens, or another door opens, whatever. Well, I was reaching out to a few people to see if I could find someone who would be interested in joining us, and lo and behold, guess who decided to say yes? My beautiful, sweet friend, Eileen Dillon. She's a therapist. She's a writer. She's brilliant. Eileen, get yourself on camera here so we can say hello to you properly. There she is.
Hello.
Now, I want to say something here that really excites me because all 4 of these people now, all 4 of us, have been co-authors in my book, The Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. But also, we contributed to Sarah's book. Now, Sarah, just remind us of the title of that book.
I didn't become selfish. I became harder to manipulate.
Right. And that one was published last April. And I know you're going to be relaunching into a hardcover, or sorry, the paper bound, or whatever it's called, the paperback version of this coming up in April again. Is that right?
It looks like it. 1st of April is going to be the anniversary of the release of the ebook with the audio. And it looks like that's when we're going to be doing the paperback, along with our fireside gathering with the authors as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And then, of course, Scott is now the lead author in his own book. I'll let you talk a little bit about that, Scott.
From burnout to burning bright. It's about burnout. With everything that's going on in the world and how quickly it's changing and how overwhelming it is for some people, I really felt that this was an important aspect of our lives. And Sarah and David were, I'm grateful that they were able to join me in bringing 25 authors together to be able to bring this book out, which is coming out in May.
Yeah, awesome. And not to be outdone, I'm going to say this as well. I'm working on my own solo book, again, a new one called The Tree of Life Mastery. And all three of these beautiful people have contributed what I'm calling a guest expert vignette. And I'm just working like crazy trying to get that book finished. So I'm really excited about it. I was hoping to get it done mid-April. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it then, but that's my target for the moment. Meanwhile, enough about all of that. That's really awesome. Eileen, I want you to start us off and introduce yourself. Tell us what you do. First of all, tell us who you are, where you are, and then what you do and why.
Okay, the whole hour is for me. That's good. Okay, so my name is Eileen Dillon, and I've been a psychotherapist. I'm in my 54th year as a psychotherapist based out of California. I live in my RV, which you can see behind me. This is the bottom of my bed right here. And I've been living in my RV since 2017. After my husband passed away, my wonderful son came and said, "So how old are you? How long are you going to live? How much money do you have? How do you want to spend your money? Want to keep paying taxes on this house, or you want to do something different?" And I decided to do something different, and I've been on the road ever since. So I work with emotions and help people improve their lives. I have had the pleasure, the joy of being able to understand emotions in ways that most people don't seem to understand, and that I've been working with now for 50 years, that emotions are actually a gift given to us to help us decode the various life situations that we encounter, the life experiences we have, because I perceive that we're all in a giant school, and our job here is to learn and grow. So when these lessons come up, we can use the emotions we experience to decode what the lesson is, and then learn it. Because as soon as you learn an experience, it's over, and it doesn't keep repeating and creating a lot of pain in your life. I also appear on podcasts, and I'm a professional speaker. I'm going to be a speaker at the Wellness Universe Soul Treat coming up in the end of April. And I'm a 9-time Amazon best-selling author with collaborative books, including the one you mentioned. And I have my own book called Emotions in Motion, Mastering Life's Built-in Navigation System.
Well, thank you so much for that, Eileen, and welcome to the program. I'm so glad you've decided to join us. I know that we're going to have some amazing conversations in the months ahead, so I'm really looking forward to it. Sarah, how about you? Would you like to tell us who you are, where you are, what you do, and why?
Hello, I'm Sarah Jane. I'm in the UK, complementary health therapist, working mainly with energy in the form of Reiki and sound, a technique I call vocal Reiki, that supports people to reconnect with and heal the hurt and pain of their inner child. I'm also the founder of Gift of Healing TV, which helps. I love interviewing people. I love having these conversations, sharing meditations, exercises. All of these wonderful people have been on with me. and I love doing that aspect. It's helping people to share their wisdom out and their knowledge, their experience. I also channel dragons, mythical beings, speak light language, and goodness knows what else. Oh, right, of course, an author.
And outside of that, you really don't have much to do.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And always a delight to have you here. Scott, tell us who you are, where you are, what you do, and why.
I am in Boston, just south of Boston, actually. I'm a quantum energy practitioner. I help professional men and women as they walk through life. My business is called The Healing Journey, and I walk with them through the path to be able to get to the other side. Sometimes I have to pull them off the cliff. Sometimes I have to pull them out of the water, but always guide them to where they're meant to be. The reason I do that is much like what these three beautiful people do, and that is once you get to the other side and you've gone through life yourself, you want to be able to give back. Generosity of spirit, that understanding that people are having a tough time and every once in a while they need a life preserver. So if you're there and you have it, to be able to pull that in. And just these words, wise words from all three of these other people, hopefully will trigger something in you to help guide you to where you need to be.
Right.
Nice.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. And I don't know about you, but occasionally I've had to actually push people over the cliff. And I don't say that just to be glib, you know. Sometimes when you're about to do some deep work, it might feel like you are on the edge of a cliff. And the only way through this is to take the leap and trust in the essence of who you are and what's really going on inside, and realize that really there is no cliff. That's just an illusion. And so, yeah, sometimes that gentle nudge, you know, the little push is what it takes. So, yeah, don't be afraid to dive into the deep end. As Eileen was sharing with me this morning, she's in the middle of doing her own inner work right now. And I'm sure that this is true for Scott and Sarah. You know, we all have our own challenges that we have to deal with. And we can't just ignore them because, you know, spiritual bypass, that's a technique that a lot of people try to use. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know, you can have your faith in whatever religion you want and believe that external entity, that external deity is going to answer all your prayers and solve all your problems. But ultimately, you have to take action yourself. You know, you have to choose for yourself. And then maybe the universe will reply and respond for you. So, you know, I think it's really appropriate that you're joining us today, Eileen, because here we are talking about this idea of breaking family role patterns. Now, just so you get caught up, we had our conversation and we were talking, well, what's really up for people today? And you know, what do we think that might be relevant? And one of the topics that came out, I can't remember who brought it up, is sometimes the people in my family just don't seem to recognize me as who I am. They still want to see me as that person that I was back when I was a kid or whenever. And so we're trying to figure out ways of helping people who have to deal with that sort of thing break through those patterns and get your family to see you for who you really are. And maybe at the same time, you get to see them for who they really are. So that's what our conversation is about today. And I'm now going to open up the floor. Whoever wants to have the first stab, please go for it. Go ahead.
So I was reading, I was doing some in-depth, went down the rabbit hole about adult children. And having lost my own parents, there were four in my family, 2 sisters and a brother, and we were all slotted into a particular role in our family. And whenever we get together, we all kind of assume that role. I noticed that, by the way, when my my daughters who would be married and with children, when they came home, would all of a sudden turn into a 17-year-old that needed everything, and everything had to be done for them. While even though they were grown up and taking care of their own homes. So the interesting part was so many families break up because the parents pass and everybody kind of separates and they take on their own families. And that's because I find that we don't nurture that relationship the same way we do with friends, of growing with our siblings. That it's that oh, this is who I am. They see me as that. My little brother, he's taller than me, bigger than me, older. He sometimes appears older than I am, but he's always the little kid. He's always the baby of the family, right? And he kind of sinks back into that role. So I really tried, and having gone down this rabbit hole, I really tried to go and have honest discussions with my sisters and brother to let them know who I actually was now, because they are so involved in their own world that we didn't really, we see each other, every three to 6 months, honestly, because we live further away. But it's that finding out who they are again, what they like, what they don't like. We know what happened because we grew up together, right? We were in the separate bedrooms. Sometimes we slept in the same room, and we knew them like the back of our hand. And as they've grown up, we've kind of missed that. And so for me, it's always been about reconnecting with them in a different way as a grown-up. Not always easy. And they found it hard because they kept dealing with me as if I was the older brother who wanted to pick on them all the time, because the oldest brother had to pick on all the younger kids. So that was my role. But I let them know that I was there for them, and it's really changed how we all see one another. And they've called me now, and I've been able to help them in different situations that they wouldn't have done before because I made that contact. So our dynamic changed.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Scott. Who else would like to go?
I'll
Go ahead, Eileen.
if you don't know. Yeah. Well, my brain is just really working hard. I remember a story my husband Bob, who was a neurosurgeon, told about when he was in training to become a neurosurgeon. He went back home and his sister was having a medical problem, and he had a syringe with the appropriate medicine in his black bag that he was traveling with, and his mother refused to allow him to give that remedy to his sister. She had to call the doctor first, and the doctor said, "My God, woman, your daughter can't breathe. Use that right away." And it was such a strong example of what we're talking about here. And as I was thinking about coming on today with this topic, my idea is that we all have this issue, and the reason we have this issue is that in order for us to function well in our family as we're growing up, we involve ourselves in what I've learned to call survival contracts. We give up parts of ourselves in order that we continue to receive the love and care that we believe we need. And for some people, these people you have to push over the cliff that you were talking about, for some of us, happened for me, by the time we get to be an adult, we're living a lie. We're not even the person that we were when we first, were here on the earth. And there's a whole process for reclaiming that. It sounds like, each one of us in our own way, we work with that process. And so in reality, all of us need to do what you've done, Scott, which is to assertively re-educate the people around us, including us, about who we really are and what parts of us we want seen and what parts of us we keep putting into the world.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Eileen. Sarah, what would you like to share about this?
I'm going to come at this a slightly different angle. Myself and my sisters.
No, not a different angle.
Myself and my sisters, I think we are actually very good at seeing each other as the human beings that we are. But something that has sort of occurred within the last few months was, how do we know our parents? We know them as just that, our parents. But do we really know them as human beings, as people? The people that, you know, the same way that people who work with them know, the same way that their friends know them, etc., etc. In fact, the same way that our grandparents knew them, because obviously they knew them as children. We don't know our parents as people, we just know them as our parents. And so we have actually started this, myself and my youngest sister. We spent some time with my mother about 2.5 weeks ago. And we started asking, and we've recorded this, and I will at some stage get around to transcribing it, but at least we've now started the recordings of asking her about her childhood, asking her about her experiences, what she can remember of the Second World War. You know, what her mother, you know, what she can share about what her mother went through at that time. Mind you, the fact that she was, I think, was she 2, 4, something like that. She was born in 1937. So she wasn't very old when the Second World War started. And her father, although wasn't in the services, because he worked for Cable and Wireless, although that wasn't called that at the time, it was called something else. He worked in communications. So he was sent out to Malta and Gibraltar for at least 4 years, never getting home, because obviously the servicemen and women didn't get home unless they were injured. And so he was away solid. So she was that much older by the time he got home, and she just didn't know who he was. But he also didn't know who his child was, because he'd missed so much. And so learning family history, and my youngest sister's actually been really, really good at doing our family history and learning more where family were living, etc., etc. She's finding out things that even my mother didn't know. Sort of. So do we know our parents as people? And so this is why this exercise with Mum, to hopefully get more of a sense of the person rather than the mother. Right. And nice. I hope then that she'll start to realize we are not her children, and we do actually have wisdom, because of, you know, my youngest sister is now, well, if I'm 67, my youngest sister is 61. So we're all in our 60s, and we are all still treated as children. Oh, no, you can't possibly know what you're talking about. Excuse me.
Yeah. You know, as you're sharing this, I'm reminded, my mom passed in 1992. That's 34 years ago now. Hard to believe. Anyway, when she passed, I was really surprised that I thought it was just going to be a small family funeral kind of thing, you know. But there must have been a couple of hundred people showed up at her funeral. Wow. And I got to meet people I'd never met before. And some of them shared with me little aspects about my mom that I never would have known had it not been for her passing. You know, sure, she was a yoga instructor, so many of these people who showed up were her students. But there were a lot of other people who showed up and that I just didn't recognize. Of course, there was family there too. My mom's, well, my mom was the oldest in her family, but her next oldest sibling, my Aunt Marguerite, she showed up at the funeral. She had a lot to share about my mom and what she went through as a kid. And I mean, it was a eyes wide open kind of experience, you know. I don't recommend people wait for the parents to die for that to happen. But I'm grateful that I had that experience, because I got to see my mom as a completely different person. If only I had had the opportunity to get to know her in that way while she was still alive. That would have been pretty amazing. So now that's just a little story I wanted to share. But Scott, you were talking about how you share with your siblings more about who you really are. I really like to help other people learn how to do this. So I would love for us to share maybe a little bit about how we can go about educating our siblings or even our parents about, and our children, of course, about who we really are.
So my dad was in rehab. He had a physical bout, and he was in rehab and coming out of the hospital. And so I would go to visit him every other day. And we sat on the bed, and it was the first time that my dad didn't just pay attention to the television. We actually spoke. And he was telling me about his childhood in that time. He was telling me about being 5 years old and 6 years old and 7 years old and going to work, sweeping floors, because my grandfather was in prison, something I didn't know. And at the time, there were three kids at home. My grandmother was selling donuts, taking in laundry, doing anything she could to make money. And so there was a store a block over, and he would go and sweep the floor for this gentleman for a nickel, back in the 40s for a nickel. And late 30s or early 40s. And so it was extraordinary to be able to listen to that. And what it taught me was I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. When he was 65, the day he turned, he could retire, he did, and he said, because I'm sick of working. And I'm thinking to myself, sick of working? What do you mean? But then I found out he had been working since at a very, very young age. He worked all the way through school. He couldn't play sports in high school because he had to get a job after high school to help support the family. So work was always there for him. What it did for me was realize that I didn't know the people that were closest to me. And that's really when I sat down and I made a point. I went to my sister's house and we sat for 3 hours at her koi pond. Now, she told me half that time was telling me about the koi. And each one and what the story was, and they all had names and they all had different colors. But the other half was understanding and telling stories that we didn't have time for, was that quiet time. I think we all know that the quiet time is when we find ourselves, but we're also able to share ourselves with other people. When we have clients, having that really sacred space, that space that we keep, and being able to allow the vulnerabilities to come out of people. That's where I find that it makes the most movement, is when I hold that space for people. So I intentionally went to each of my sisters and my brother, and it was a number of times, and it wasn't anything dramatic. We sat around with my brother. I had a beer. With my sister, I had a cup of tea, and my other sister, I had a cup of coffee. And it was nothing more than that, except intention, and letting them know who I was, where I was at that moment, and some of the stories that I couldn't tell them, because we only saw each other in large groups or family gatherings. So for me, it was taking the time to just sit and talk and listen, even more importantly, to allow them to be able to tell me where they are, who they are, and if there were any misgivings about who I was or what I had done, or, when you were 17, you know what you said to me? And I'm like, one of my sisters, and she's, never let me forget it. But we were able to clear those things so that they weren't an impediment just in speaking to each other. So that was the tool that I used, was just holding space and being able to really listen.
Well, it was actually two parts to that, as I understood it. Holding the space is one of those, but setting the intention as well, I think, is an important element of that. And another thing that you mentioned that I think is important, and we may just gloss over this, is that the things that happened in our lives, we just kind of dismiss them because they happened to us, and that's just part of life, right? But what
Yeah.
the truth is, most other people have no idea of what we went through individually, you know? And so while I might say, oh, this is just big, it's no big deal, you know, the one that I often cite as an example is, yeah, so what? I was a fighter pilot, big deal. But other people have never had that experience. And so wait a minute, you don't just drop that and let it go. You've got to give us more detail, you know? And so what I'm going to encourage people to do is don't downplay the experiences that you went through. No matter how small they might seem in your mind, they help to shape who you've become today, and someone else might benefit from learning from that. So just, give yourself permission to feel free to share the truth of who you really are and all of the things you've gone through. I guess that's what I want to say in the end. Eileen, you must have some great tools as a psychotherapist for helping people to, come together and learn from each other who we really are. What do you suggest for this?
Well, first I want to say I'm sitting here thinking about my experience, sharing myself with my younger brother, who's 9 years younger than me, my half brother. And I want to look at it as a universal experience. When I told my truth to my brother, he responded by telling me I was a liar. And so we can run into objections or blocks. And the reason that I figured out that he thought I was a liar is because if what I said I experienced had occurred, then he had to change his idea of who his parents were. And he was not at all happy about that. And so I just want to say that what I chose to do then was go back to my experience of my brother and start talking to him about all the tender moments, all the sweet things, all the wonderful parts of him. I had taught him to read when he was very young, because he's 9 years younger than me, and so forth. And that has brought us back to being able to talk together. And so here's the big issue for me, the way I look at it and the way I would encounter people I'm working with, is that we all came here to the earth in order to have a life, in order to have experiences, in order to hone who we are, make ourselves better, heal things, etc., etc. And that's the primary focus. And at some point, we're invited. We could do it from the beginning, but as I talked earlier, it's sometimes against us. But we're invited to keep exploring who we are and then letting other people know what we've discovered. And most of us are afraid to do that because either it doesn't fit with with the stories of the family, or it could possibly hurt somebody else, or you've had an advantage that somebody else didn't have and you're worried that you'll make them feel bad, or they'll think you're a victim. Whatever. It's very difficult to come out. But the more we become who we really are, when we focus on our own growing, when we focus on sharing that growth with others, like I shared with you before we came on air today, David. I was telling you, this is what's going on in my growth, right? The more we do that, the more we create a cohesive energy with ourselves. And that cohesive energy then is less permeable. People are more likely to believe us. We also will attract in, like we may have the sibling that actually can hear our story, whereas another sibling might not be able to hear our story as well. And so the deal really is be your own self as much as possible. And yet, when I was in the spiritualist church many years ago, they talked about the law of what can be borne, BORNE. And they said, when you're consciously and spiritually aware, you don't want to talk to somebody about something that drives them crazy, that they can't handle. And so
Right.
once you are on a spiritual path, then you have a responsibility to both be who you are, share who you are, but also not overload other people with who you are.
You know, there's so much wisdom in what you've just said here. I had a very similar experience with my own brother, who's only 3 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've always had this hope that we could be closer, but to be truthful, it just hasn't worked out. You know, he's got this image of me as some kind of a monster, to say gently. And to be honest and fair with him, I had a lot of anger issues back when I was a teenager. So there's no question that he's somewhat justified in that belief system. But what it's done is it's created this rift between us that makes it difficult for us to connect at all. And when we do, if I try to share with him about, you know, the truth about who I am and the experiences I've gone through, he doesn't want to hear it. And well, okay, so my only option now, I'm not going to lie about who I am. I'm not going to stop telling the truth about who I am. But since he doesn't want to hear it, I'm going to honor his space, and maybe one day he'll decide he does want to hear it. But I want to encourage people. You got to be true to who you really are. You know, it's one thing to compromise a circumstance and a situation for the benefit of everybody, but don't ever, ever, ever compromise yourself. That's when all is lost. It's really, really important to remember that. So that I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Eileen, for your share.
Can I add one little thing that came to
Yeah.
mind that I did once that I think is a good opener? I visited my adopted daughter in Ecuador, and I was inspired at one point to ask her, how can I be the best guest for you? What would you like me to talk about? What would you, what's important to you? Whatever. It opened the door when, instead of going there with my stories to tell and my thing, which I'm really good at, you may notice, instead of going there with my stuff, I asked her, what would be most supportive to you? And I think that's a really good opener for many people in our families.
Well, I think that's a great question to ask anybody, you know, and it's a compassionate question. So yeah, that's a great question to ask. Sarah, I'd like to hear from you on this topic. What's your experience been like?
Well, I've got a couple of things to share here. Going back to your mother's funeral, we had a friend. I've got a whole group of friends, and sadly, Graham died. He was, well, what was he? Is he mid to late 60s? So I don't class that as being old. I really don't. similar age to me. Great. I could have these sort of conversations with him. I can't with any of the rest of the group. And for his funeral, he got a son and 2 daughters. And the whole group of us got together. We got the photographs from all the parties and things that we'd done over quite a number of years. And we created 3 collages, one for each of them, with different photos of their father. And they looked at those photos and their reaction was, we didn't even know this side of our father. So very much like you, they learnt about their father after. And I suppose this is then what's come forward to me about learning about mum. And then a few years ago, my sisters and I actually got an evening, just the 3 of us at my middle sister's house. And we talked. And we talked about our childhoods, we talked about loads of different things. And we all agreed at the end of that, you'd think we'd been brought up in different families, in 3 different families.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because the experiences I'd gone through, the experiences Katie'd gone through, the experiences Jackie went through, and Katie's 2 years younger than me. Jackie's 6 years younger than me. And at sort of 12, so when Jackie was 6, my parents bought a small hotel. Pocket money stopped. I think Jackie probably still got it because she wasn't actually obviously old enough, but we had to work in the hotel, cleaning rooms, waitressing, whatever was necessary. And so we became very used to being a part of a whole process of creating, of clearing up, etc., etc. And you know what, the three of us are still really good when we're together, and with there's a load of stuff going on, we really do work together. And that's it's a learned behavior, but to me, a very positive one. But my youngest sister, it's about listening. My middle sister isn't quite so open. I think she's afraid to go there. So I don't think she'll ever watch this, so that's fine. But my youngest sister is really, really open with what's going on with her. She doesn't tell me everything. But at 55, she was diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, on the autism spectrum, complex PTSD, which has helped her to understand herself, because she is so differently wired to me. But it helps to understand that. So what is going on within our families? We're now hearing that nieces and nephews, some of them have got aspects. Great nieces and nephews, some of them, in fact, I think probably nearly all of them, have got aspects going through both my sister's families, because I don't have children. So if people are open to actually really being aware that there is much more to an individual other than just the family experiences. There may be a wiring thing going on for them as well. And I get the feeling I've got aspects of some of that stuff. But complex PTSD, from what Sister Jackie was saying, can actually almost mimic some of the other symptoms of some of the other conditions. Many of us know about those type of things because they may not come into our lives. Well, they've come into my family's life a lot. So it's being aware. My mother now says, I can actually see that I've probably got some of these issues. And did our great-grandmother have great-great-grandmother have this? There's all sorts of this. And so that's family generational stuff. And it's not a matter of breaking it, so much of understanding each individual and helping them to be open about who they are, listening to them, but also, yes, as each have said, encouraging them to listen to you. And it can be so freeing if you're prepared to be open.
Right. And of course, as you say, having an understanding of things before trying to change it. I mean, that's really important. That's to me, that is the whole purpose of acceptance. You've got to accept something as it is right now before you can even hope to change it. But it's through that understanding and through that acceptance that you discover ways of evolving your patterns so that they're more constructive for all of the people involved, right? Scott, what do you have to say about this?
Wow. So many different aspects of family come through. I had two daughters that survived, and because I lost one very early. But you would think that they were 18 months apart, but you would think they were brought up in two different households. As a parent, you try to be very, very you try to raise your children in a certain way. You try to give them certain things, you try to mold them as best they can, and for them to blossom and become the people they want to be. And it's amazing when I talk to each of my daughters that they have very, very different understanding of what growing up was. They have very different perspectives. And sometimes I don't even understand where they got any of it from. One daughter said, "Oh, you never yelled at us. You never said no." The other daughter said to me, "You never let me do anything." So
He always said no. Yeah.
So it's that just a different perspective in how you do that. We all think as parents that we can love each of our children the same, but as in life, they always can receive it in a certain way, and you can only give it in a certain way, and what is allowed. And that's I see a friend of mine is one of 10, a good Irish Catholic family, and they're one of 10, and every single one of those kids had a different upbringing. Depending on where they were in the pecking order, how many kids they had to change, how many kids they had to feed, who was older and who had to take over, and division of duties and all of that. And it was just amazing to see, and it really broadened my perspective on duties and how families survive that kind of chaos, I guess, more than anything. Living in a 5-bedroom house with 10 kids. So that was just really, really interesting. But the dynamics of that, and to see that they're all close, and to see that whenever anybody needs anything, they all come together. Even though they don't, necessarily live in each other's lives, whenever there's anything going on, they always come together. So it's a different way of how I was brought up, but it always allowed me to see that, you can find family and deal with them and be separate, but a part of. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. And so you're kind of echoing what both Eileen and Sarah talked about is, the siblings all seem to, when they talk about their experience, it sounds like they came from completely different households. And I think that's universally true. I think even if you had identical twins and then, you waited until they were 20 or 30 years old and you asked them about their experiences, I bet you'd still get the same result. They would report completely different experiences, even though they may have gone through exactly the same situations, together. The other thing I want to say is this idea of parents loving their children the same. That's just simply not possible. I don't think, no, even if I believe I'm expressing my love in the same way from one child to the other, there's going to be a difference in the energy, regardless of how the other person accepts it. I honestly don't believe there's any such thing as equality. Equality is a great idea, but there are no two identical people. There's no two identical experiences. Equality is just a nice little mathematical concept. That's what it is. So yeah, we have to be compassionate, loving, and gentle about this, and understand that all of us going through even a common experience, something that's very traumatic, like 9/11, for example. Each of us had a different experience on that day. No matter where we were, even if we were at ground zero, we all had a different experience. So yeah, I think that we need to be gentle with each other and understand, okay, I understand you experienced that differently than I did. That doesn't make either of us wrong. That's just different. That's all it is. So yeah, I think we got to learn to be more loving and gentle with each other and say, oh, I experienced it this way and you had it that way. Wow, that's cool. Let's talk about this. Let's find out where the common ground is. So it's an opening. It's another possibility, right? I think what I I mean, like I told you about my brother and the situation that we have and how he's not that interested in finding out more about me. So I practice this with my sons. I want my sons and my daughter too, if she would open up and talk to me. Got another challenge there, which I'll share for another talk. But with my sons, we have been through some common experiences together. So we do have a kind of bond that makes it possible to communicate about stuff. And I think of my oldest son, he's almost like a friend now. I'm still his father, and I guess I'm always going to see him as my son. I can't really take away that part of the relationship, but I am seeing him as a sovereign individual man now, who without the label of son applied to it. And that really makes a whole huge difference in my relationship with him. You know, so I can hear his wisdom with a much more open heart. Like I don't get the sense that he's trying to lecture me or teach me or be my parent. You know what I'm saying? So it makes it much more possible to increase I don't want to say intensity, but the strength of the bond between us. You know? So I guess all of us can learn from that. Just my thoughts.
Can I expand on the compassion idea that you're bringing up? My sister, my older sister and I, we were 22 months apart, kind of like you, Sarah. We were very poorly cared for in the early years of our lives, which was during World War II. And so my sister essentially became the person to whom I attached. I would not have survived without her. And during that time, she was a little kid who had no supervision, whose job apparently was to look after me. And she formed some ideas about who I was. And she also formed some patterns about how she related to me. And I was always reluctant to find fault with her. But she came to live with us in the last 7 months of her life. She died of cancer. And during that time, she and I had some deep talks. And in one of the talks, I talked to her about something she had done my whole life that drove me absolutely crazy, that made me not want to be around her. And I told her straightforwardly. And she looked at me with horror on her face and said, "Oh my God, you're not who I have always thought you were." And I said, "Yes, that's the message I'm attempting to give you. I am not the person you have decided that I am." And I was so grateful that she heard it, but she also went back into herself, and she was depressed and she was angry and she was sad. And she was in my home, and I needed to leave room for her adjustment. And so I just want to bring out the awareness that when we do change our relationship with people in our family that we care about, they may have a reaction, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's their process for readjusting.
Yeah, I like that process for readjusting. Don't we all have to go through those processes for readjusting?
Not me.
I can't imagine how many readjustments I've had over the course of my life. And sometimes they were readjustments, at the hands of someone else. You know what I mean? Attitude adjustments, so to speak. I guess what I would really like to focus on here is that the compassion piece is important, because, as you say, the other person that you're speaking to isn't always going to receive what you have to say the way you thought they would. So don't be attached to any particular outcome. Relax, let it go, be truthful and honest about what you want to share, and let people deal with it in the best way they can. And try and find that place of love in your heart to give them the freedom to make that adjustment, even if it takes 10 years or longer?
It's about being true to ourselves, isn't it? It's about the learning to say yes to us and no to others, but also respecting when others say no to us. Because we are all unique individuals. And I'm very lucky that, well, even mum's starting to sort of to say no rather than yes, because we were very definitely brought up in a yes family. We just said yes to everything. And the people pleaser within me, it was yes to everything. And I've learned to say no. I still say yes sometimes, but I've learned to say no. But my no to people is giving others permission to say no. And constantly saying yes, people think it's okay. But we're not teaching them that actually it's not okay. The no doesn't have to be unkind. There has to be thought and consideration in it, but no, please, that's not relevant to me. That doesn't work. And mum's having to do that now. And it's just like, she wishes to be involved in things. It's just like, but I can't do that anymore. That's fine. We try to work round things for her because at sort of 88, she's got horrible arthritis. She has to have numerous steroid injections in various aspects of her body just to keep the pain controllable. So she isn't in a position, she isn't able to be as active as she used to be. So it's not just understanding somebody from, if you like, the mental, the emotional aspect, it's the physical aspect. The woman she was 20 years ago, she is not today. Because physically, she can't do what she used to do. So it's listening to all of that, but being true to ourselves in the process.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Look, we're getting close to our closing time here. I just, I'd like to begin wrapping up so that we can be finished by the top of the hour. Scott, would you like to say any final words as we begin to close out?
Yes, don't give up on your family. Reach out before it's too late. Things change, people leave. Don't leave any regrets. Reach out to those people that you used to have to share a bunk bed with or share meals with every day. Reach out with kindness, compassion, and let them know who you are and that you accept them for who they are. Plain and simple.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. Sarah, would you like to share some closing words?
I think what I've actually just said, it's just be true to you. And they are your family at the end of the day. And Scott said, don't be afraid to reach out to them. But you've also got to accept that if they've got issues, they may not wish to be reached out to. All we can do is say the door is open and leave it to them. We just have to do that. Respect them.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And Eileen, would you like to share some final words for today's show?
Yes, it was my privilege to tell my father before he died of cancer, thank you for being my father in this lifetime. And I'd like to add to what everybody else has said, which is let your family members know what you love about them, what you appreciate about them, what you've always admired in them.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking, and you don't have to do it by text or email or something. There's this old-fashioned thing called letters and post offices. I can imagine that receiving a card or a letter from my brother would it would really lift me up because it's not something that I would expect. So maybe that's a way to reach out to your family. I love Eileen's idea. Just think of all the things you love about a brother or a sister or someone that you haven't spoken to in a while and write a little letter. You don't have to ask for anything back. You don't, this is not an ask back. This is saying, Rick, Diane, Joanne, Leonard, I really want to just share with you something I love about you, because I've been thinking about you a lot in the last few days. And then write it down. Hope you're doing well, bro, sis, whatever, mom, dad. Hope you're doing well, and I look forward to having the opportunity to talk to you sometime in the future, whenever that happens. And just leave it at that. Can you imagine receiving something like that from someone you haven't spoken to in a while? That would be pretty awesome. So I guess my final words are, love yourself unconditionally and bring that loving person into the lives of the people around you without any expectation. That's my invitation to you. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for being here today, and I want to thank you for watching this show or the recording, whichever way you're doing it. And I want to remind you that you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. And we'll all be here next month, for another episode of Soul Empowerment. So bye-bye for now.